An instructional video by Qic Consulting Group.
All right, in this installment, we're going to continue on with part 6 of the basic QuadGen health check. Part six here is going to deal with SFP mapping. Now, we've skipped a couple of sections here in the health checks. These above it deal with RET subunits, and RETs is a whole nother video series that you'll have to undertake. That's a whole thing in itself, and we've also skipped RI link information. This is reference points that you can look back to, but they're not really as important as the SFP mapping diagram that we're going to take a look at right now. So starting on the left here, we see the cell identifier. We're still on MSL 01178. We're on the 700 frequency on alpha sector. We're looking at RI link number 4, and that number there is just an arbitrary number that the technician on the other end gives it during scripting. We can use that to reference that RI link and gather some more information about it that we can talk about in other videos, how to troubleshoot fiber loss and so on. But following on, we look at DUS XMU. So this is going to tell us what DUS we're plugged into here, and this is DUS1. Again, DUS1 is really just an arbitrary number. If you really want to confirm what DUS you are plugged into, you can reference what the serial number of DUS1 is in the health check, or you can simply just ask QuadGen and say, can you please tell me what serial number of the DUS is 700 alpha supposed to be plugged into, and they can tell you that. In this particular instance, we're looking at SFP mapping, which is this is exactly what the configuration of the technology that we're looking at. So it's in DUS1, it's plugged into port A, and then we can take this information, gather it up, and then compare it to what we see on the ground. And if the two things match, then we know, okay, we're on the right track here. But if something is off, say maybe there's an inconsistent configuration issue on site, right? And we see that this here says it's supposed to be DUS1 in port B for 700 alpha, but when we look on actually what's plugged in on the ground, we see that it's 700 C, 700 gamma, right? This could cause a sector swap here, which won't show up as an alarm, or maybe it's actually 1900 that's plugged into port A, and that can cause an inconsistent configuration alarm, which we would have to address. So this is one way you can compare what you see in your health check to what's actually on the ground. If we follow it over, we see that there's a serial number listed here. This is going to be the serial number for this SFP card that's in here. So this is the model type of SFP card. So we see that it's a 47.3 SFP card that's plugged in here, and this is the serial number of the actual SFP card that's plugged in. So this is real-time information that the system is pulling from what's actually connected to this, to the port in the DUS, right? And then, so we can compare this with the type of radio we have here. That's the most useful way to use this information. Does this radio take this type of SFP card on the ground in the DUS at the controller end and the BBU end, right? If the answer is yes, then we know we're good. If the answer is no, for instance, maybe it was an 8843 and that doesn't take a 47.3 on the ground, right? Then we can say, okay, well, we have the wrong type of SFP card on the ground here. We need to change that, and so on. So we're comparing and contrasting what we should have versus what we actually do have. And we can do all of this, even what's in the RRU, which is coming up next, before we climb the tower, before we even open a door of the shelter. We can start taking a look at this and getting some information about what the system is reading on our site. So we see the next block over is RRU. This is going to tell us that we're operating on RRU1 here. And quick note, like a couple of the other videos said, we can use the find function on our keyboard by holding down Control and pressing F in our video or in our PDF file here. We push Control F, and that will give us a find function there. If we type RU-1 into this find block and then push Enter, it will find all the occurrences of RU1 in the health check, and then we can find out exactly what type of radio that's running 700 alpha, And we can also find the serial number of that radio and its operational state and all that stuff, which we go over in other videos. But in this particular instance, what this is telling us is RU1 is reading from data port 1. It's got a 47.3 SFP card, and this is the serial number of the SFP card. Remember, we're dealing with SFP mapping here, so all this information is going to pertain to SFP cards. This isn't the serial number of your radio. If you wanted to find the serial number of the radio and the model type, that's what you use the find function for, and you can look that up doing just like what we just said with Control F and then type RU-1. It has to be exactly what's here. A lot of times I just copy and paste if I want to do that, which I go over several other videos too. So we can see that the SFP types match, and we're just confirming. If we don't have any problems on that node, then there's no real reason to read it. But if we do see problems on 700 alpha, we can go here. If we see RI link failures, or we see SFP mismatch is sometimes an alarm, but even if you have different SFP mismatches, it might not come up as an SFP mismatch issue. QuadGen might not identify that as the actual issue, right? They might not look that deep into it. That's our job as the technicians, to look that deep into it and compare what we know should be on site with what the health check is telling us is on site, and also what we actually see on site when we open up the system and look at the SFP cards that are installed and so on. So we compare the type of radio we have to the type of SFP card we have to what should be there versus what the health check is telling us, and that's how we start to investigate what problems we actually do have on site. Sometimes if you have a mismatched SFP card, for instance, maybe this was a 6525 here, that would not, the link rates would not match up, right? So if we go up here, we can see link rates in our RI link information. These link rates right here are SFP card specific, right? So if you see right here, this SFP card right here on RI link number 3 is 9800, right? And this one is 2500. So the link rate of the SFP card in the radio versus the link rate that is in the SFP card at the DUS must match up, right? So if we have a 6525 at the DUS end and a 47.3 at the RU end, we're going to have link rate mismatch. It's going to give us a BER rate, a low BER rate, and that's going to cause problems. It's probably going to cause loss, and then that'll just come in as fiber loss. But if we spend time cleaning that fiber, we're wasting our time because we don't have the right SFP cards to match up there on that node, and that's we shouldn't waste our time doing that. So SFP mapping is important. You use it just to gather information about your site, and then once you go a little bit further down, you look at transport SFP. This is actually your SIAD connection, right? So it connects into DUS 4101. It connects into port TMB, and this goes from your DUS port TMB over to your backhaul connection, right? It's usually located somewhere over by your UMTS PDU in your RBS cabinet, and this is the actual site connection to AT&T. So if you get your whole site is off the ground or off air, sometimes they call it a heartbeat alarm, you need to check this port and that fiber connection right there. If that fiber is unplugged, then QIC, AT&T cannot see the site, period. They cannot log into it. They can't see any of the readings. They can't monitor its status. That's your SIAD connection to AT&T's switchboard. So that's a little bit about SFP mapping there and how to use those numbers to determine what's what on your site.